So I decided to fly to Connecticut to try their pizza, burying my feelings in food for the entertainment of strangers and friends on the internet. I also wanted to put this book inside of the Yale Library, but we'll get to that. So I'm stealing a bit from Dave Portnoy and getting a cheese pizza everywhere. The mentality being that if you can nail the basics, you're probably pretty good at the other stuff. This isn't scientific in any capacity, but I will absolutely argue with vigor over my opinion because my opinion is the best opinion. Amen. So here's what I prefer, just so that you can kind of compare it to what you like and, make your judgments accordingly. I prefer a crispy crust. I want a little bit of chew for textural diversity, and I want sauce with enough flavor that it's going to show off a little bit. The cheese should be melty, but not piled on as though it's the only ingredient. In short, I want what Uncle Iro called balance. So here's the story of the trip. I arrived late. I rented a car from Truro and drove another 45 minutes from Hartford to New Haven. And look at all that traffic. Look at it. It just goes forever. I got stuck in traffic and then had to make my own bed in one of the worst Airbnbs I've ever stayed in. It was chaos and very uncomfortable. Check the trash on the porch and these lists of instructions that the owner left for me. It was remarkable and very unique. But the next day was for pizza, and that would make it all worth it. The first stop was Frank's Pepe. This shop has clout. It's been mentioned in blogs and stuff. Dave Portnoy gave it something in the 8s. He was very wrong. But I also had several locals recommend it as one of their favorite stops, so I was looking forward to it. Frank's is in a part of town that's set up like Little Italy. It's in a strip of restaurants. Frank's is near the end of the block. The shop is smaller, and I picked a booth, ordered a margarita pizza, and a beer. Now, this is unfair, and it's my fault. This is the only shop that I judged on something other than a strict cheese. I felt badly enough about it that I thought about going back, but spoiler alert, I don't. So I guess I didn't really feel that bad. They're famous for clam pies and tomato pies, so I figured the margarita would hit the tomato pie check boxes, and it's one of my favorite simple pizzas to order when going out. It came to the table steaming hot, looked pretty decent, and my waitress served it up with a local IPA. I forget the name, but it was good stuff. I took the first bite of Connecticut pizza with a flutter of something resembling anxious hope in my heart, and I swallowed that bite to resounding disappointment. It was fine, I guess. The crust was decent, great around the outside, but the sauce was bland. The basil was just okay, mixed with a scattering of mozzarella that tried its best to save a pie that was already too far gone. My second bite was straight through my lower lip, drawing blood at an embarrassing volume. I know, rookie move, and another bummer. I left and gave the rest of the pizza to a homeless man that asked if I was in the FBI. Then I headed up the street to Sally's to try their cheese. They didn't have indoor seating available, so I snagged a spot under a tent at a table that felt ripped straight from a German beer garden. Kind of like this German beer garden. The atmosphere was awesome. The line was too long to get another drink, so I just sat with my pizza at a table too big for one guy. This pizza was much better than Frank's, but sadly, it also felt underwhelming. And I hear you screaming, of course, cheese pizza is underwhelming, you absolute child. And I get it. I really, really do. Toppings add a great deal of depth to a pizza, and I'm a fan of so many weird ones, right? But I still maintain that you can make a great cheese pie, an exciting one even. But Sally's was neither. It had a much more substantial crust structure that held up nicely and added some decent textural diversity to the experience. The sauce was better, though still far from incredible, and the cheese was nicely layered. It still wasn't what I came all the way from freaking Texas to eat, though, and I left ultimately disappointed. I tried and failed to find someone else to give the pizza to. I guess that's the perils of sharing during COVID. And I spent the remainder of the day editing a wedding film in a coffee shop. That night was better, though. I was told to try bar by several people. It came up in almost every conversation with strangers in regards to their favorite pizza, so I was looking forward to it. It shares the street with Lewis's Lunch, which is recognized by the Library of Congress as the birthplace of the hamburger sandwich. Here is a very quick clip of me eating there at some point during the trip. It was a great burger, decent spice. I liked the spot. It felt kind of like it was ripped out of a Harry Potter book or Lord of the Rings. It was just a very tavern type feel, and I loved it. Back to the pizza. Bar was the only place on my list that required a vaccination card. I didn't bring mine in part because it's so poorly sized that I couldn't have managed it into my wallet without some serious origami, and also because I'm bad at planning and I did very little research before going on this trip. They accepted a picture of the card though, and I sat at the bar of bar to order my dinner. That was funnier in my head than saying it out loud. The bar, it's cheesy. I'm leaving it in. The bartender was great and served me my favorite beer of the trip, a toasted blonde that they brew themselves and they don't ship, I asked. Under the advice of almost everyone in New Haven, I ordered the mashed potato pizza in addition to the regular cheese. Mashed potatoes sounded gimmicky kind of, and I mean, it was a little bit, right? Like, who puts mashed potato on a freaking pizza? But it was really good. The mouthfeel is probably exactly what you're imagining, but it was contrasted against the crunch of the crust and the savory bacon. I really dug it. They also have a Thanksgiving pizza in November that I desperately want to try. The cheese also blew me away, and I'm so thankful because if pizza place number 3 had been as disappointing as the first 2, I would have been having some serious self-reflection as to whether or not I actually love pizza or maybe I just like it as a friend. But this pie was so damn good. The crust had the right kind of char, the type that whispers the shape of the fire that forged it as you bite down. Its sauce had a great punch, and it cut through the richness of the cheese perfectly. This was my favorite so far, and absolutely worth the trip in and of itself. The environment was great too, and had there been more people in the space, I think it would have been an amazing hangout. I left, gave the rest of my pizza to 2 college girls that excitedly told me they were taking it to a party. I was on my way to grab ice cream down the street at Milkcraft. Milkcraft's hook is that they small batch their ice cream in these stand mixers with liquid nitrogen, so every single scoop is made individually for you with the batter, I guess? I don't know what you call it. This made for a cool foggy haze along the counters and a feeling of alchemical wonder when you walk inside. The girls in front of me couldn't decide what they wanted to get, so we collaborated and ordered cookie butter, bourbon breakfast, and toasted almond butter. I opted for a bubble waffle cone, which is the correct choice. The ice cream was smooth, almost to the point of being a milkshake, but with, like, musculature. I swear that analogy makes sense. This meant that it melted pretty quickly, but it was creamy and tasty. Not crazy tasty. Not even $9 crazy tasty. I've had much better bubble cones and ice cream, but it was a decent way to close out the dinner. I crossed the street to Geronimo's Tequila bar, and I wrote a whole blog about that experience that I'll post later, but I met a really cool dude who put habanero inside of his margarita. It was interesting. The next day, I met an old friend at Yale for Haven Hot Chicken outside of the Beneke Library. I don't want to sound too hyperbolic here, but this was better than any fried food I can remember having. The chicken was crispy, perfectly spiced, and it came with phenomenal Lay's waffles and a honey butter that you poured over the top. You only have a few meals like this in your life, where circumstance, location, and hunger collide perfectly with food that resonates deeply in your soul. This wasn't a lunch with a friend so much as a spiritual awakening. I cannot overstate how much I dug this damn chicken. It rained hard, and we caught up for a bit. I didn't have a drink with the food, which was a poor choice that I blame on my friend/delivery guy. I spent the rest of the day exploring at Yale, but you needed to have a student ID to go pretty much anywhere. I managed to sneak into the Beneke Library, but they wouldn't let me bring my backpack. So unfortunately, I couldn't get the book in there, but I got a little bit of footage. Here it is. Okay, now back to the pizza. That evening, I met back up with the same friend and his wife for what they claimed was the best place in New Haven. They may not be wrong. I'm going to butcher this name, but Delegno was artistically industrial in design and huge. It felt fancy, and the bill reflected as much. I ordered a Tarantella cocktail. It was okay. And in addition to the cheese, we got a figura, which was prosciutto, gorgonzola, fig preserves, mozzarella, and truffle honey, and the pecora, which was goat cheese, fresh ricotta, pistachio nut, truffle honey, and caramelized red onion. They were each incredibly well-done pies. Sweet, salty, and savory didn't collide in your mouth. They danced, like lovers under a starlit canopy on the first perfect night of autumn. Figs are so underrated as a pizza topping, and the preserves felt wonderful here. I'll admit my only complaint was with the prosciutto. It was tedious to eat because of the size of the slices of the meat, but let's be honest, I'm nitpicking. It was great. The cheese pizza was no exception. Remember how I said earlier that a cheese pizza could be both tasting and exciting? This is exactly what I meant. The crust had a bit of softness to it, but it was still perfectly substantial, and it held up against the sauce and the cheese with aplomb. The sauce was absolutely everything that you want in a pizza sauce, tangy and present without overloading the sourdough taste in the crust or the subtlety of the mozzarella. If this were to be one of the peaks of the trip, I was grateful to have enjoyed it in good company. I debated going down the block to Modern, a spot that was recommended by a couple of people my first day, but I felt so content I didn't want to push myself past that happiness into misery for a stupid blog that 3 people might read or watch. So I went back to my second Airbnb and I crashed. The next morning was an early one, and I went out to the beach to watch the sunrise. It was wonderful. The pizza on my last day in New Haven was from Zupardi's, which isn't in New Haven, but it is where the beach was in West Haven. There's honestly so many different havens within a few miles of each other that it's kind of a blur. You know when someone lives in Plano, but we say they live in Dallas? It felt like that, but no one abbreviated it to a major city. They all stayed specific in reference to their homes and had strong opinions about the neighborhoods and class of the people in other rival havens. West Haven was most commonly shit on by the people that I talked to. They called it trashy, sketchy. They didn't like the people and thought it lacked whatever it is that New Haven had. Yale? I don't know. It was fascinating stuff. Zupardi's was comforting. I don't know how else to phrase it. The pizza wasn't remarkable, but I still enjoyed it more than Sally's or Pepe's. They had a group of 10 senior citizens come in while I was there, and I think that captures the vibe here really, really well. It's old, not updated since at least the 70s, and there's a classic charm to its decor and booths and colors. The crust was too chewy, but the sauce was good. And while it was a greasy mess of cheese, the taste was there. Not the best, definitely not my favorite, but still a good spot and one I'd love to take my daughter to. It fills a remarkably different need than what I feel the other shops tried to, and I love that about it. I left and waited a full 10 minutes in the parking lot for the bus of elderly to move so that I could leave. And after that, I was off to Hartford, and I shot a hype video for their baseball stadium. The pizza part of my trip was over. I love food. I love trips dedicated to the exploration of food, and this whole thing was a blast. I wanted a lobster roll before I left Connecticut, so I went to this highly reviewed place that looked really like a chain, like a lot like a chain. The atmosphere was terrible, but the reviews were good, and I was exhausted. I'm not saying that for sympathy, but to say it might have affected how I felt about food. The days became blurry along with my vision. The table next to me was made up of 3 elderly people that were celebrating someone's birthday. One was on oxygen, and they were having the kind of conversations that people have as they reach an age in which too much life has been experienced for the big things to matter. And instead, all talk is reduced to the minutia. The waiter dropped a glass, and it was a topic at the table for a full 2 minutes. It was sweet. They seemed kind. The lobster roll was $29, but I knew what I was craving, and it absolutely hit the spot. Buttery to the point of overindulgence and full of fantastic lobster. I was in heaven. Not one of the havens, just heaven. I went from there to Barcelona to enjoy olive oil cake and one last cocktail. The service was wildly terrible, but I really loved this spot. Tucked behind a taco joint, it had a vibe that so many places lack, and it was filled with beautiful people enjoying great food. This trip was a bucket list item for me, and it felt really good to get it checked off. I wasn't quite as blown away as I thought I was going to be, but expectation is the thief of joy, so that's probably on me. If you don't want to sit through me talking about the traveling and the cool places that I went in Connecticut, you just want to know the rankings, here's a quick ranking of my favorite shops in Connecticut. And if you disagree, let's fight about it in the comments. I hope you loved the reviews. Thanks for watching. I probably love you. Peace.
Am I still the one you see when you close your eyes? Am I still the one you need when it's late at night